Hey guys, my name is Emma and today I'm going to be reacting to the comments that my dad made about the mystery TBR that he sent me. So if you've no idea what I'm on about, there's probably two videos that you need to go and watch before this one. So at the beginning of November, my dad sent me a challenge of reading 4 books where I didn't know anything about them at all. So he'd removed any signs of the cover or the title or the author, and they were wrapped in brown paper, and I had 4 books to read knowing nothing going into them. Then at the end of that, I have now filmed a wrap-up. It was posted a few days ago, so I will link that down below, revealing what the books are and my thoughts on them. And whilst I've had a brief chat with my dad on the phone about the books, I haven't actually seen what he told you guys at the beginning in that original TBR video. So he hopefully ran through some of his reasoning for why these books that he wanted me to read, what he thought about them, things like that. Get my headphones on. So book 1 that Dad's going to be talking about is this. It's Mission by Patrick Tilley. It's Jesus is an Alien. Very, very strange. Go check out my wrap up for more thoughts on it if you want to. But let's find out what he had to say about this.
I can't tell you about the author or the title, but we have book A here. This was a book that was first published in the early 1980s. I read it first when it came out then. Left a big mark on me, not because it's particularly earth-shattering, but it rounds the story off really well. It's a whodunit with elements of time travel in there, theology, philosophy, and really just tries to pull together a whole lot of ideas that at the time I was reading it seemed very, very good. The author has done an awful lot of research to actually make sure that he can pull all these threads together in a meaningful way. The ending is a little bit surprising, but works really well in terms of the overall consistency of the story. Overall, the book is one that I've read again. I read it again recently, and what I found on rereading it was that the author has clearly done an awful lot of research, but the problem is it can be a bit wordy in time. He's very, very keen on showing off just how he's tried to pull these threads together into a very, very coherent whole that you've got there. Like all of the books I read, it's not over long. It's just under 400 pages, so not too much of a challenge for Emma in that way. I don't think she will have come across the book before or come across the author before, so hopefully that will be quite a revelation for her there.
Yeah, revelation. Yeah, no, I totally agree with Dad on lots of those points. Interesting that he considered it a whodunit. I didn't really pick up on that as an aspect. The theology and philosophy aspects of it were very extensive. Personally, I found that they got really lost in the world building of the sci-fi, and I confess to skimming a lot of the very wordy exposition bits that he said, just because I was getting bogged down in it. I think like Dad reads things far more closely than I do, so he probably picked up on a lot more there. I'm a plot girl, I want things to move fast, so I found this frustrating in times. I agree with him that the ending is awesome, and we've already spoken on the phone a little bit about this, but I really wanted more from the ending earlier so that we could have taken those ideas and gone a bit further with them. No idea if the reason why the author hadn't done that, maybe they were planning on writing more, this could be part of a bigger thing, but yeah, I felt like the ending should have started maybe like 100 pages earlier than it did, and should have been kind of the third act as such, whereas you just sort of got lost in exposition in the middle. But it was very interesting, and yet not one that I'd heard of before or read before is this one. Very funky book, very strange.
The reason I chose it, she has her degree in philosophy, there's elements of theology in there, and I certainly know from other things that she's read that the idea of time travel and that sort of aspect will appeal to her. So I'm hoping she enjoys it. There we go, book A.
okay, like I can totally see where Dad's coming from as to why he would have picked it for me. Like he says, I do have a degree in philosophy. It's something, I like time travel, I like all those concepts. This got a little bit too metaphysical for me, and there was way more theology, I would argue, than philosophy. So theology is specific to religion, whereas philosophy is more looking at just kind of problems within the world. So I felt like it was missing some of those bits personally. I do really enjoy time travel stories, and I did like some of the time travel aspects, but again, I wanted a bit more from them. The time travel was really just the Jesus character popping in and out of our, or what was modern day timeline, which was the 80s, because that's when it was published, and I wanted a little bit more from that. I prefer my time travel to get a little bit freakier and to run into more paradoxes personally. So we're now on to book B, which is The Big Sleep, Raymond Chandler. So let's do this.
Book B, excuse me, I just need to look at my notes here. This is an absolute classic, written about 50, 70 years ago, something like that, not entirely sure. It's a classic of its genre, yes. And the author is one of those who is very, very well known. It's a thriller, crime thriller that you've got there. The work of this author has been translated into many languages and many media, as well as the novels that there are there. It's one that I think, when she starts reading it, will become fairly obvious.
Yeah, it did. So if you see my wrap up, you know I guess this one very early on, because Raymond Chandler has a reoccurring character, Philip Marlowe, who is like Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock, or any of our very modern day crime writers tend to have a detective or a PI, somebody related to the cases who they follow consistently, and Philip Marlowe is Raymond Chandler's. So as soon as the name popped up on the first few pages, I knew who the author was. I couldn't pin down the exact book, but I knew it would fit in the canon, and I had a sneaky suspicion it might have been The Big Sleep, because this is the one that Raymond Chandler is probably the most well known for. I mean, he has a very long back catalogue of books, but this is the one that gets mentioned quite often.
From the amount of material that's around there, the other formats that these books tend to be in, and the breadth of the author's influence throughout this genre, that I think probably within the first dozen pages she'll certainly get the author and probably the title. I don't know whether she's seen any of the work or heard any of the work.
I haven't.
I don't believe she's read anything by this author though, but I know she's been into sort of thrillers and crime and things like that. It's certainly not the blood and gore crime thrillers that can be contemporary now. It's much more gentle in many ways, but cleverly written, very consistent, some nice twists and turns in it, and again, I hope she will enjoy it. So that's book number B.
Completely agree with everything Dad has to say there. Crime is something that, and thrillers are something that I read semi-regularly. I've definitely read far more of the contemporary ones, and my partner and I have been watching Bones on TV. I've just picked up a Kathy Reichs to try that one out, so it's definitely something that I've tried before, but is something where I tend to go for the more gore factor. This was really classy with how it handled lots of things in it, and it was just really such a like archetypal black and white movie style like crime story. Does that make any sense? It reminded me a lot of Some Like It Hot, which I did tell Dad that, and he agreed with me. The whole thing feels like it should be read in like a Chicago accent or something. Like, it's just so cool, and everyone's really like suave, and just smokes constantly and like drinks neat whiskey, and it's just, yeah, very cool book. So book C was My Childhood by Gorky, who is a Russian author, and this is the only non-fictional on this. This is autobiographical, as the name suggests, looking at his childhood specifically and kind of ending roughly when he turned 17 and 18. So let's find out what Dad has to say. I'm most interested in some ways with this one, because Dad's a big fan of Russian literature, and this was probably the one that I enjoyed the least, and was mildly confused as to why I'd pick it. I don't know whether he knows that I'm not a big fan of biography. I can't remember how vehemently I've slandered biographies in the past in front of him. We'll find out.
C is a historical autobiography. European, not UK based. A very, very distinguished author who is widely regarded by many people. It's the first of a trilogy of his autobiography that there was. I don't believe the biography went on further than the three of them, but again, I could be corrected on that. Yeah, marvellous. I know Emma has mentioned some things about reading from this particular country and authors from this country as well. I'm not sure how much she's read of this. Again, pretty sure she hasn't read anything by this author. He did do more than just the autobiographies that I've just been mentioning there. Why did I choose it? Again, when I read it, it was a very... It's something to me. It's quite historical. It's set 100, 150 years ago. Again, can't remember exactly how
About
long.
100 years.
But there's aspects of the life that is being described that I could hear echoes in from my own parents and from sort of some of my background and seeing how things changed. So it was really interesting to read it, to see that sort of continuation of how things were into sort of paternal history and then my own life growing up there. Not to suggest for anyone for any second that the life described in the book was the life that I had growing up. It certainly wasn't in that sense, but there's elements of it. You can hear the echoes going back. So yeah, it has a resonance for me, and again, a different style of book, autobiography. Again, hopefully Emma will enjoy it.
It's interesting that Dad picked up on the kind of continuation of history, because one thing that I really enjoyed about Gorky, my childhood, was the complete differences compared to my own upbringing. Gorky, it's 100 years ago. He's lives in Russia. It's a Russian peasant family, basically. There's a fair amount of abuse in it, but not in in a totally like culturally acceptable and like time period acceptable kind of way. It was... I can see where he's coming from, and the fact that, the struggle of humanity is fairly consistent across time, but I definitely wasn't looking for any connections between my life and Gorky's, and I definitely didn't appear, it didn't resonate in that way. For me, it was really just like a snapshot into history. I did enjoy it, but I have to be kind of careful here, because it was an interesting experience reading it, but biographies aren't for me. They're just not. Even the best biographies that I've read have not been ones that have particularly been strong for me, especially when they are very much that posthumously looking back on that time period of your life. I much prefer the ones that are either diary entries in the moment or very, very focused snapshots on one particular area. So it was as good as any of the other biographies that I have read, and I enjoyed it probably as much as any of my favourites, but they will never rank highly for me because it's not a format I enjoy. And I'm not going to go and read the other two. It's not going to happen. Right, D, that leaves All Quiet on the Western Front. An absolutely iconic book.
And the final book, again, one that I've read a couple of times, very, very powerful, a classic. Basically, it's an anti-war book, biographical, semi-autobiographical, people have said about it, has been translated into many languages and other media that we've got there as well. Very nihilistic in terms of how it looks at things with regards to the war, and yes, just very, very powerful. Again, hope she enjoys it.
I would agree wholeheartedly with everything Dad said there. All Quiet on the Western Front is, I think powerful is really one of the best words you can say for it. To say that you enjoy a book like this is probably quite a strange thing to say, because it's not an enjoyable experience reading it. It's very emotional, it's very intense. It really does, like, I finished it quite late at night, and it was me and Andy curled up in bed, and I finished it and he would already like decided that he was going to go to sleep, and then I finished about 10-15 minutes after he'd sort of settled down, and I just remember curling up with him being like, I've just finished the book and I can't, like, I just can't even begin to yeah, just nihilistic, anti-war, all of those things. Completely 110% agree with Dad on all of that. So yeah, wow, cool. So that's the end of my mystery TBR series with Dad. I can see where he's coming from some of them. I was most interested as to why he picked book A and book C, to be honest. The Raymond Chandler and All Quiet on the Western Front make a lot of sense because they are fairly iconic. The Jesus one was interesting. And so was Gorky, and it was really interesting seeing that we've picked up on very different things from both of them. So good fun. Did you guess any of the books? Have you read any of these books? Just like, what did you think to this entire experience? I'd love to give it another go, maybe get a different family member to do it, or get Dad to go round again or something. So if you would like to see me read more books where I have no idea what the hell I'm reading before I do it, then like, comment, all that jazz. I'm supposed to do a reading vlog for you and I just forgot. Like, I filmed the reading of the first book, and then I just totally forgot to film anything else because I'm rubbish at vlogs. So this is all you're gonna get from this, and I will chat to you soon. Have a great week, all that jazz. Love you, bye.